I feel like a lot of people would say that you have something that's actually the hardest part.
I wouldn't say it's like good taste. I would say it's more like I have a non-neurotypical, slightly eccentric, divergent mind that operates way outside of normal conventional reality.
Maybe give us an introduction of where we are right now.
We are in the man cave. This is my garage here in the South Bay, Southern California. A converted space for the sake of efficient work.
Yeah.
Well, I can still have a door where my kids can knock on it, my wife can knock on it, and
you said earlier not to read all the books on the shelf here. Why was that?
Every once in a while, like if I have a friend over, I'll notice them side-eyeing the kind of books, trying to figure out, like, who is this dude? Okay, he's read that. He's read that. Oh, no, he's read that. Oh, no, there's a picture of this. Oh, you know. So it's just that I collect the books because it's like a gamut of my explorations last, almost like 25 years.
Yeah. Eliot, do you remember the first time we ever met?
I want to say... Are we talking Houston, Texas?
Yes. No, Austin.
Austin.
Yep. It's a funny story. Can I tell you? Can I remind you?
Please.
So I was working at Musicbed at the time, which is funny, full circle. And we were interviewing you for some video. I can't remember what, but we were interviewing you and like Philip Bloom and like Shane Hurlbutt or something. Everybody was at Masters in Motion. Remember?
Yes.
You did a talk that was very beautiful at Masters in Motion. Made Daniel cry, which is another story.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. We had this interview and I had like really admired your work. Obviously, like young filmmaker, sort of just starting out. So I was like really looking forward to this interview.
I'm scared. Uh-oh.
And we got some like warehouse space or something. And right before we went to set up, we had this Thai food that was, and Thai food just like does not agree with me. So I like went to the bathroom right before our interview.
Did it seep out into the interview?
And you came in right when I was coming out, like door shuts, bathroom. I'm like, and then you're standing there. You just came into the interview, and you were like, "Hey man, my name's Eliot," and then you go right into the bathroom, like right after me. Very disgusting story to start this off, but
I love it.
You come out and you like sit down in the interview chair and whatever, and you just like. Look at me. You just like look at me and you're like, did you just use that bathroom?
No way.
Yeah.
I called you out?
Yeah.
No. Did you lie?
No, I said, yeah, I'm sorry, dude. And you're like, that was terrible.
That was terrible. Yeah. Oh no, I shamed you in front of your whole crew and everything?
Yeah.
Oh no. I could have been more discreet.
No, it was funny though. I think at the time I was like, frick, man, like now I have to like do like a very serious interview with this guy and he just called me out. And I feel like, but it turned out to be funny. It was like,
I probably did it to relieve my own anxiety.
Sure.
my wife's recently told me I've got to stop doing that. Like I sort of throw like small little grenades into serious conversations.
Yeah.
Because like if I'm with people and people are either taking themselves too seriously or it's too sophisticated, I'll just do something a little tricky.
I feel like you got to diffuse it somehow.
Yeah, but I'm trying to work on it because it's usually like it's like sweeping someone's leg. You know, it's almost like passive aggressive, sarcastic, something like taking a poke.
Yeah.
But it's always been my way of like humanizing the exchange.
Yeah.
So it's probably love.
No, I fucking love for sure. It was like the highlight of my day that I was like waiting for it, and then I was like.
But you've got to think, I grew in greater intimacy with you, though,
exactly.
because of it.
I felt like we were better friends after that, for sure.
A deeper connection.
Yeah. But we've gone on to hang out many times. Obviously, I've gotten to know you over the years, but I don't think I've ever gotten the story of where you like started. I know you were kind of like an editor in an agency, maybe, but like, could you like go back and just like give me sort of that Cliff Notes version of your upbringing into the film industry?
Yeah, so always an artist, pen and ink in a sketchbook, traumatized by life, did not know vocationally how I would survive, came from like lower working class family in the burbs, and they were both starving artists. Pops took a job at the refinery, And I think they were always, in sort of financial turmoil, trying to just get me out the door. They knew I was gifted as an artist. I would do these incredible face renderings. Like when I was very young, I would just draw people's faces all day long. And I remember my dad was a prolific artist, and so is my mom still to this day. But they're like, oh God, he's touched.
Yeah.
And in high school, I ended up taking, I went from like hypersensitive, like scared little artist kid to like, oh, I'm sort of around really, I'd say like tough competitive culture. And so I think I resurrected some strange longing for like football, martial arts, and in high school was still drawing privately, and in art classes was like really I was loved by the teachers, but it was like it's a kind of private thing.
Yeah.
And this is a long-winded way of getting to the story, but it was in college where I was just trying to survive financially. I was like working in a different assortment of different jobs, and I was delivering food for a Mediterranean restaurant. I was doing this computer sales job and just failing miserably on the phones trying to sell laptops. Just like, I was a mumbling kid. I was eccentric. I was like, you want to buy a laptop, and just like, just failing. And I remember this guy in this real weird fringe shop that we were working in handed me a book. It was like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Okay. Yeah, I know it.
Yeah, and it was just like how to ask great questions.
Yeah.
Get people talking about themselves. And I remember my typography teacher at Cal State Long Beach. Again, I'm an artist. I'm just figuring out, man, I gotta like figure out how to make money. I got really interested in him. And I was like playing around with this idea, and the rest of the class was trying to pass. And I'm like, hey man, how do you balance art and commerce? And like, where do you work outside of here? Do you have a job? Just asking him tons of questions. And I remember him, I think he like felt really seen and known in a very unique way. And he's like, God, Eliot, I love the questions you ask and how interested you are in my world. I'd love to give you an internship. Wow. And so the internship happened like, I would say mid-college, and it was at Ogilvy and Mather, which was an advertising agency, and they had a post-production facility there. And the internship was a 3-month internship in their tape vault. So I was making 3/4-inch tape dubs for different producers that were running around the agency trying to put together director's reels. And simultaneously, Final Cut had just launched. And part of making these sizzle reels was like to learn Final Cut. So I was learning Final Cut on my own dime, working there for free, learning from the AV department. And this whole other world was sort of like opening up. And at 3 months, 3 months after the internship started, they said, hey, you got to go back to school and finish school. We can't hire you. And I remember saying, like, I'm not going to leave. I'm going to stay here until you kick me out because I love it here so much. And long story short, they ended up firing the gentleman that hired me that had been there for 10 years and gave me his position. And for thereafter, like for about a year after, I was working there full time.
Can you recognize now why they did that, perhaps?
Why they fired the gentleman?
And gave you the job?
I think I was impassioned and really hungry.
Yeah.
I was almost, I think as a recovering alcoholic and addict, when I look back, I was almost like this. If you looked at my life, like I would wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning. I would start at Santa Monica City College doing classes in the morning. I would go to Culver City to do this internship, which turned into a job. Then I would drive down to Long Beach, which is an hour drive in traffic, to finish night school. And then I would head up to Glendora to be with this girl that I was dating, to sleep with her until 1 a.m. and then start over the next day. And I think part of you call it my ism, my spiritual malady, was like an insatiable drive. Like, I don't know how to explain it.
Just hungry, yeah.
Super hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, like scary hungry. And I think that that knocked down a lot of doors.
Do you think at that time, like, you even saw any version of what you're doing now? You know what I'm saying?
Well, what's crazy, as that started developing, the love for editorial, and so I'm in Final Cut, I'm learning it, I'm starting to do friends' music videos. almost immediately, because I was connected with a lot of the punk bands here in the South Bay. What I reflected on, and it like hit me almost like as a prophetic revelation, was that early on when I was very young, my father always had like an RCA camera, and he was filming everything in our childhood. But at some point when I was like 3 or 4, I started turning to him and telling him where to point the camera. And so we have these videos that I ended up finding where we'd be in the backyard and I was making films as a director using him as a camera operator.
Yeah.
So it was almost like maybe written into the script of my life.
Yeah.
And I had never even realized it to be an option. I assumed I would just be a graphic designer or like a struggling artist.
Right.
So it was always there.
Yeah.
You know, I just didn't have the tools. I didn't have the teachers, and I didn't have the wherewithal.
So that job got you basically to a point where like you were just making a lot, like not financially, but just a lot of things at that point, right?
Yeah, I would just say experimenting as an editor opened up, you know, opportunities to just sort of, it was like a new, I would say almost like a new tool as an artist to just play. And I was trying hard to get out of college to get into that, further into that realm.
Yeah. Did Last Minutes and Odin come within that time, or was it coming out of that time, or when did that happen? No,
the crazy thing is, you know, I would say I almost had like a very private filmmaker's journey before Last Minutes with Odin, because thereafter, you know, as an editor, I started like doing my own films. I remember working freelance editorial for Fuel TV and these action sports networks. And I started getting opportunities to do like documentary stuff and pick up a camera on my own. And it was a very happenstance situation where a friend was like, hey, I've got this DSLR camera that's brand new to the market. Do you want to use it this weekend on anything? And then my friend Jason Wood called me, who was a beloved friend who's like saved my life. And he said, hey, I'm putting my dog down this weekend. Can you come be with me? And I thought, I can serve both of my friends here in this opportunity. And hey, Matt Taylor, do you want to come film this weekend? And we went and filmed it Saturday. In a couple of hours, I cut it together that night, sent it to my mom, and sent it to Jason. You know, stole a Bon Iver track.
Yeah.
And that was it. Yeah. And then I woke up and it was, you know, it had been watched like 100,000 times. And
did it feel like something when you woke up that morning? Like, was it kind of, obviously it's a little bit of a shock, but I mean, what was your reaction to that?
Yeah, I cried hysterically. You know, I'm someone that I think most of the time when I'm making films or I'm investigating something, I'm trying to have a cathartic release for myself, because most of the time I'm very numb and I'm emotionally detached. So I remember just having this like intense cry that lasted. I finished the cut. It was a very transcendent experience. It did not feel like I was even editing the thing. It was complete. I watched it down and I'm like, this is way beyond me. I cried hysterically. It was super healing.
Those are always, there's very few times in my career but I have experienced something like that where you do finish something and you're like, I wasn't even there.
Yeah.
Like, have you sort of learned or tried to chase that dragon in some way? Like, are there things that you've implemented into your process to get closer to that in some way?
Yeah, I think so. I think the one thing that was, like when I got sober, I crashed my car in a blackout. I was 23. Some friend recommended a therapist that recommended a 12-step meeting. I was sitting in that 12-step meeting, not realizing that first 12-step meeting for me was 10 feet away from where I crashed my car. Oh, wow. Like, just very strange. Yeah. You call it synchronicity.
Yeah.
I began to understand like life just worked that way, and I trusted it more than mastery or talent. So I had enough intuition. And I think I had enough just natural ability as a filmmaker or as an artist, and then the rest of the opportunity I just believed came through happenstance.
Yeah,
I just had to keep going after the things I intuitively felt connected to, and everything else would coalesce. And that really worked. I mean, like, really worked for me. And I think what happened was this very strange season where many of my films were winning awards. It came very easy and there was a freedom to it. But then, you know, the the masters of the art started like knocking on my door, and like Alejandro Inarritu, you know, calls my cell phone randomly one day and is like, hey, I want to executive produce your first feature. Give me your script. Like, I'm going on with these first meetings. I have an agent. I'm like, people are asking like, where's the script? Where's the mastery, you know? And then privately I was like, oh shit, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. My life is a big accident. And so there was a season where I think I like doubled down on, oh my gosh, I'm not really a filmmaker. I'm not a cinephile. And I have to prove that to people that I am if I'm going to exist in this space. So I got all the books, you know, all the master classes, like just started teaching myself screenwriting, just trying so hard to ensure that I had a vernacular and I had a talent that would match the opportunity that I was experiencing.
Do you regret that at all?
No, I think it was a hard season because I think what it did was that it put me into a state of fear. Mm-hmm. Right? So I think it was essential. I had to kind of grow up and become adult and realize that there is actually real fundamental skill and a tool set that I had to learn.
Right.
If I wanted a sustainable career. So I'm so thankful that I had the gumption to go after it and actually learn all of it. Looking back though, I don't think I did it in a place of like love or freedom. It was like, oh shit, I have to catch up quick.
Like I'm an outsider here.
I'm an outsider, yes. You got it.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people would say that you have something that's actually the hardest part. You know what I'm saying? Like even early on, coming from your childhood, like the technical stuff is almost the easier part to learn because it's something that's, you can write it down, you could get on a set and learn things. But the hardest thing is that like real subtextual sort of, how do I present humanity without sort of being contrived? So
I think what I've been given is, I wouldn't say it's like good taste. I would say it's more like I have a non-neurotypical, slightly eccentric, divergent mind that operates way outside of normal conventional reality.
Right.
It's what God gave me.
Yeah.
It's the way I see the world. And I think like my process and my intuition is so foolish in the eyes of like rational thinking. That piece of me is my art. It is my greatness. But I think pressed up against the expectations others have of me, or pressed up against like the rigidity of the craft, or the rigidity of, or the specificity that's required to accomplish things.
Right.
Many times I don't have the capacity or the ability to like honor that.
Yeah.
And that duality between like, so a more logical, rational, you know, pragmatic mind and the more eccentric, intuitive nature is always this like crazy balance.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you feel like being an outsider has kind of been a through line through all of your work?
You know, it's funny, in the rooms of recovery, that's like our main spiritual malady, that we feel like aliens on earth, you know, like we never belong, we don't belong. That, I mean, I remember my earliest memories always being the watcher. You know, all the kids were playing,
right?
But I had my headphones in.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and I'd be listening to music, and I'd be watching them, observing them, and studying them. And I think, you know, the more I've become a writer also, writers are the same way. They love to observe, and they love to watch. And I think it's this crazy paradox, because I long to be on the inside. I long to be connected. I want to feel a part of. And there is work that I can do to actually feel, I think, more intimate with other people. It's where I'm heading, I think, in my life now. I really do want to feel like I belong. And I've experienced a lot of that. I think I've done a lot of work to get to a place where I'm like, wow, in any given situation, I feel like I totally belong. Yeah. I think where I've taken that, again, that sort of divergent outsider nature of mine is now I know that I love to be the watcher and the observer. I love to be the one asking questions. Yeah. And the one studying other people's lives. And
why is that? Because I'm the exact same way. And I felt like an outsider my whole life. and I think you put it the right way. It's like I enjoy watching.
Yeah.
I don't like to be in the center of anything.
Yeah.
Like I like to disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's. I mean, I'd be curious to see. Do you feel like it's a part of your spiritual malady? Like, are you trying to fix that, or have you accepted that as just your nature?
No, I've definitely accepted it as eccentricness.
Eccentric, yeah.
Yeah. Which I feel like does sort of give me the other abilities to observe and, like you said, and sort of almost write or create sort of an impression of humanity that's interesting.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
And I think I see that in all your work. I think that's why you're a great filmmaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you ask wonderful questions, but I think also like your essence, you hold a very like compassionate, great grace-filled like presence. If I were to like therapize you, I'd probably say when you were young, you were very hypersensitive and very gentle, and you'd easily cry and feel things immensely.
Yes. I would cry a lot, very sensitive, still am.
Yeah.
But definitely feel like I try and find how not to just like kind of numb things out so much,
Yes.
Because I do miss feeling that stuff so hard sometimes.
Brother, I would say the first chance I had to create some kind of buffer or numbness between myself and the world, I just started working it because I'm like, I just feel way too much all the time. It's overwhelming. I hear too much. I see too much. And, I think that when I was young, like my suicidal ideation or, my massive panic attacks were always related to this experience of just being like overwhelmed by life.
Yeah.
Other kids were like, oh, hey, we're going to go to McDonald's today. And like the questions and the feelings and everything that was just wash over me was just so intense all the time.
Yeah.
I'm
the more I grow into who I'm only 31 now, so I'm not there yet. I don't feel like, but the more I'm starting to cherish how hard I feel things.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But now it's like, I cherish it more because I think it is sort of a superpower sometimes.
It is.
If you can keep it under some wraps,
I always have these crazy moments where I've been in such a disassociated state because I've had to get through some real gnarly trauma or something, or like get through a really like heavy, intense season. And I'll go numb and I'll lose some of my hearing and I'll lose some of my smell and taste.
Whoa.
Physiologically, my body's going numb.
Yeah.
My lower back's kind of going out. And what will happen is something will come across my periphery in a very unexpected way, and I'll have a cathartic release. And I'll just start like weeping for all the tears I haven't cried 6 months previous.
Right.
And what will happen is my ears will actually pop open.
No way.
And all my sense of smell will come back. And it's as if I go from like a one-dimensional reality to like everything being technicolor.
Yeah.
And feeling connected to everything all at once. I remember when our child was born with special needs, and it just ripped me down the center, like completely broke me open, my wife included. I remember looking at her as we were both crying through it and thinking, I told her, I said, this is the closest I've ever felt to you. And she said, I feel the same. I've never been more in love with you. And I went to Starbucks to get her coffee one morning. And I remember I was so cracked open that I was sitting in that Starbucks line and there were like 12 people. And I knew every single individual's pain that they were carrying into that Starbucks. Now, this is like weird paranormal stuff.
Sure.
But it was almost like a sixth sense because I had no like egoic guard. I was like one with other people's suffering. I don't know if that's woo-woo, but
it's kind of like just to make a movie analogy, like in Unbreakable, where Bruce Willis is like bumping into people and he like sees these like flashes of
exactly.
Yeah. Crimes that they've committed.
Yeah. And I think this is it's the cursing and blessing of an empath or someone that's deeply intuitive. You just like.
What was it like sort of, and we don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but what was it like sort of managing work while your son was being born and discovering what was going on with him?
Yeah. I mean, for a year before my son was born, I worked with a woman who took me to like the depths of all of that. And I had a mental breakdown that lasted, I would say, like 4 months. I had a panic attack that kicked off at the core of the work we were doing and lasted like 4 months. I lost like 30 pounds.
Like a single panic attack?
Imagine being in a state of panic for like 3 months. And I understand why people commit suicide. I really do, because it's like, oh, this is never going to change. But what she was able to frame, which was the most powerful thing, is she's like, you've always been running from your fear. Your panic is the fear of fear. And until you get to the center of this, and a lot of it also was like, I had a disordered attachment with my mother, a real codependent relation with my mother, and I had to cleave from that relationship. And, and be with myself for the first time without having external codependent dynamics.
Yeah.
But walking through it with her guide, she was like, we can medicate you, or you can walk through this, get to the other side and be completely transformed. Right. And what happened was that, it felt like I was in a free fall, like dying every day, like such a hard thing to comprehend, but rooted in the sense that I was doing it for the sake of going all the way through the fear that I had never fully been with, getting as close to it as I possibly can to know that I wouldn't die.
Yeah.
And came out of that really healed. And I think for me, it was a lot of traumas. Like I'd dealt with a lot of stuff in my childhood that I'd never touched.
Yeah.
A lot of fear that I just always ran from. My workaholism, everything was sort of like, if I ever got into a meditative state, there was always this buzz underneath, which was like, I'm too scared to fully surrender or like let go. Right. And at the end of that, I was able to fully let go. And I remember laying on my back in the backyard and having this big exhale. And I was praying through it, but I said, God, I'm done. I'm good. I completely surrender. And it was as if I was like reborn.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are doing that, through DMT or ayahuasca. They're trying to kind of different, like quick ways.
Sure.
But it's the excavation of the terror that lies in the heart.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
It is.
Gosh, I can't imagine, dude. A 4-month version of that.
But getting back to your anxiety questions, always I'm like, it's not go too far. Working when my son had special needs, what I can say is that for many years thereafter, and I'm still kind of coming out of it, he's 6 years old, but I think it just clarified purpose. And what it did is it drew me to the details of my own life. I think I was making films and escaping the domestic realm of attention. I was like making films about paying attention or, making films about love. But I think what it did was I remember there was a social psychologist that came over to work with our son because he was pulling adults into different rooms. Mm-hmm. And she said, I know exactly what the problem already is. I know that it's the fact that you're in the room, but you're not really in the room. You're somewhere else. And that way you're showing up is actually creating a feeling that that your son believes you don't want to be with him. Mm. And I turned to my wife and I said, is that how I'm showing up? I'm here all the time physically. She said, yeah, most times you're not fully present. You're somewhere else in your head. And it's a devastating feeling. And so the woman was like, well, where are you? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. In my mind, as I'm attempting to be a good dad and be present with my family, I'm creating my films, right? I'm creating my films or I'm studying the thing that ultimately is going to help my film. But I'm never in total contact with the people that I actually love. And this goes back to the question about being outsider.
Yep.
So she came, I think, from a more secular standpoint. She's like, you just need to be with your son for 15 minutes a day. Go where he goes, be with him, watch his breathing, watch his eyes, be fully mindful with him. And that will satiate him and make him feel like his father's actually seeing him and wanting to be with him, that he won't be doing this weird thing. And that changed the behavior completely. But I think what it did more than anything for me was, in regards to my filmmaking and my career, I realized I wanted to do a lot more living than creating. You know, I wanted to get into the details of my family's life. I wanted to double down on the relationships that I had and get much closer in attention and in presence with people that I love. And so I would say filmmaking took a secondary sort of place in my life where it was always kind of a primary thing.
Right.
And I think I'm still probably there, you know, where I would say surely relationships are more important than achievements, you know, but also that like if somehow my career and my filmmaking begins to disrupt the interpersonal relationships I have that are really essential for me, then I need to pause that and ensure that my community, my relationships, you know, are healthy.
Yeah, totally, man. What's something that you learned from Leonardo? Like, what? Give me something that your experience with him. Obviously, from you said early on, he kind of contacted you, but I know you did A World Unseen and stuff like that. But what was it like working with him? Yeah.
One thing is I always pronounce his last name wrong, and I think I do it on purpose.
Did I say it wrong?
No, you said it right. I always say it wrong.
How do you say it?
Inarritu, you got it.
Yeah.
That's it. So I'm always corrected. I think I do it on purpose.
Inarritu.
Just to take him down a notch.
Yeah. It's one of those sweeps.
Yeah, one of those sweeps, exactly. Yeah. I think that's why he liked me too. When we hang out or in conversation, I think there were a lot of yes men around him.
Sure.
And I would just be like really frank.
Yeah.
Even like giving comments on Revenant before it was finished. And it opened up, which was crazy. Because I think, you know, it's a weird thing with fame. I've been around so much of it. My heart actually breaks for people that are like uber famous. I don't feel like I'm in any kind of trance when I'm in their presence. It's almost like, oh gosh,
totally.
What a burden.
Yeah.
Sometimes what a curse. You know, I've tasted a little bit of that myself, but I think they crave real feedback, real conversation, and I think because I maybe earned a little bit of that with him. I remember him turning to me before the Revenant was finished and they were about ready to head to Argentina to finish the film. And Alejandro asked me, he said, Eliot, how do you think that we should finish the film? And I said, what do you mean? I read the script. I know how it finishes. He goes, no, but what do you think? And again, back to this very non-neurotypical divergent way of thinking, very intuitive way, things kind of come up out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And I remember I'd interviewed Arthur Red Cloud, the medicine man in the film, out in Texas. And Arthur was like first-time actor. I think he was like driving gasoline trucks for a living. And Alejandro just plucked him out of nowhere. And I remember asking him, I said, what is the film about? Like, what's the core through line? And Arthur was like, oh, revenge doesn't belong to man, it belongs to God. And I'm like, wow, that's beautiful. And when Alejandro asked me, I knew Alejandro's methodology. Alejandro's a very, very curious person and always asking questions to everyone in the room. I think even like the waiter or the waitress, like he's very interested. And I remember, I'm like, well, Arthur said the point of the film, maybe the way to end it would be, you know, landing on this idea that revenge doesn't belong to man, it belongs to God. And I remember Alejandro going, interesting. And
how was it originally written? Do you remember?
I don't want to say because that script was like super confidential. And I might even get in trouble for saying this, but I'll tell you how I approached it with Alejandro, but we were at the friends and family viewing after they'd gone to Argentina and finished the film. It was their sort of best cut putting forward to everyone. And I was with my wife and I'm like, I wonder how he finished it. And at the very end, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio is like holding Tom Hardy's neck, and then he like turns to the camera and says, you know, revenge doesn't belong to man. Yeah. It belongs to God.
Wow.
You know, and afterwards I was walking out in the paparazzi and everyone was like swarming Alejandro. And I was just trying not to like, you know, be another thirsty individual.
Right. Yeah.
And he ran towards me and grabbed me. He's like, oh, did it work? Do you think it worked? You know? And I said, yeah, but you got to give Arthur a writing credit now. Cause you know, and he's like, oh, I know. It was just so perfect. And what I realized, it's a long way of saying what I realized is even Alejandro, you might believe that he is Fincher-esque in his mastery, but comes from it from almost like a more Malick way, you know, where I think he has the very strong vision in place, but allows for so much spaciousness of exploration at the 11th hour.
Yeah.
You know, and is willing to actually entrust the normal layman, you know, the little like C- kid that's like in his periphery with an idea that might actually like be better than his idea. And for me, that was an immense expression of like humility and a practice of curiosity that like inspired me.
Just to go back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, I almost feel like that's it, man. I don't know if I can really articulate this, but what we were talking about, sort of where the universe feels like it just kind of creates something. I wonder if that's it, or some part of it, you know, where it's like not thinking that you are sort of the god of the thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like letting it sort of create itself through the people and the energy around you. But as directors, it's like what we're told. We're told kind of the opposite a little bit through repetition, that you need to have the answers.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing there?
Yeah, I think it's both and. I think it's co-creation. You know, I think it's doing your part, you know, showing up, being in the details, as we were talking about earlier, you know, absolutely giving it your all. And in some ways staying out of the expectation of, or staying out of the results in a certain way, and being open to where that goes, and also being surprised by where that goes, and being open to changing course. I think there's something in that symbiotic dance. I mean, I can remember countless experiences in my own films where I remember Chase Irvin and I were doing this film, Breathing Underwater together. It was a short, but like I could not figure out how to end the film. And I remember
it's like the family in the background, in the backyard,
and Chase. I was like, God, how do I end this? I just need a more concretized, symbolic, metaphoric way of expressing death and rebirth. And the young girl kind of comes over in the rose bush, and Chase just starts filming her, and she picks up like a dead bird, out of the rose bushes, and she just walks it over to the grandfather in the scene. And he looks at it, and Chase is filming this thing, and they both choose to throw that dead bird over the cliff. And there's no way I could have figured that out. Yeah. And yet, like, it was, and
you're shooting on film and stuff.
I'm shooting on film. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I'm like, oh my gosh, was this moment written in time? Yeah. Am I just showing up for this? Is it like, it's a very crazy out of the box, synchronistic interplay.
It is sort of like the way that you could maybe justify things is like, I'm going to attempt to create situations for things to surprise me.
I think so.
You know what I mean?
I think so.
Which is very hard, especially in the commercial world.
That's right.
I do want to ask you that, like, how do you keep that same intentionality or sort of randomness, or, you know, finding universal synchronicities like in the commercial space?
I would say it's much less of a opportunity there.
Sure. But did I feel like when I see your commercial work, it like 100% feels like maybe not a passion project, obviously, but like it feels like you. It feels like the way that it doesn't feel like, oh, there's Eliot doing a Nike thing. You know? It feels like, oh, that's kind of an Eliot film, you know? Yeah. And this brand got lucky to like do this thing with him. You know what I'm saying?
I think I roll into the experiences in a very like almost gestalt, like method directing way where I'm destabilizing everything. Sure. Even though there's a plan, and I've spoken about it with the cinematographer, and there's been an animatic, and everyone understands the way it's going to go. I think the essence of what I'm creating and the way I'm developing relationships with cast, or in any given moment, there's this sense that suddenly everything's happening. Yeah. Everyone is outside of their personas they've brought in, and things are being captured, and no one like really realizes it. Right. And then suddenly, you know, it's that single take that fits in perfectly for a 30 or something, you know?
Has it ever, without naming names, has it ever not worked out with a group of people or an agency or a brand or something?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I think I've had to become better at clarifying process.
Yeah.
I think when I was young, I just expected people to give free rein to that kind of...
Right.
But now, like in a casting session, I don't work with an individual at a time. I'll bring 10 people in at a time, and I'll actually workshop something that's almost like, you could call it like a coaching exercise or like a Gestalt therapy session where I'm creating chaos and destabilizing the entire room, and then watching the way everyone is responding in their small nuanced ways to figure out like what I can actually work with.
Yeah, I see. It's almost like you're not even casting for the role, you're casting for a collaboration. Almost. Yeah.
And again, because commercial making is primarily visual, what I'm looking for is the essence of someone.
Yeah.
Like, are they going to show up on my set and stiffen up and suddenly become, someone that sees the cameras, that knows the jig and
now they're acting,
plays to the light?
Yeah.
Or are they going to remain imperfect and vulnerable and a little bit scared and a little bit curious? And I think what I'm always looking for is the rigidity in someone.
Yeah.
And I usually stray away from the rigidity of someone, an actor or actress, if they're, I can feel it. Like I try to like talk about their diarrhea experience in the bathroom, and to see if they laugh about it or where they go with it.
Right.
But if they're taking it very serious or there's something there I'm like, this is going to be difficult to play with them.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
When are we going to see a feature from you, man?
Yeah, I wrote a screenplay. So I'm like, I wrote the screenplay. It's like low budge, probably like 250,000. I
love that. By the way.
Yeah.
It's hard you would be surprised. And I know you probably talked to a number of commercial directors who work on high level sets.
Yeah.
Where it's like an intense amount of money for a short amount of days, that can't even think about making a movie for $250,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like so hard to them to even comprehend.
Yeah.
But I love that you're doing that.
Yeah, I think honestly, if I ever do features, it'll be the only way I want to make them.
I love that so much.
Yeah, because what I can say is that when I was writing this screenplay, it's a true story. And what had ended up happening, again, this is a divergent way of making film, but I was taking real stories that I was very close to, writing them into a singular story. And then what I'll start doing is probably working in a very, very small, with a very small doc crew.
Yeah. But it is narrative, right? Like it's
narrative.
Yeah.
And I think if you were to watch it, the blur between fiction and reality will be impossible to decipher.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that.
Yeah. That was Last Minutes with Odin. I did this PSA with Benjamin Loeb, these two PSAs where they're full docs, but I wrote both of the films and used actors. It's for childhood trauma. Mm-hmm. Everyone in my circle were like, "Oh my God, that's the most amazing documentary I've ever seen." No one realized it was completely fictional.
Which one was that?
Chad and Unique. That's what the name of the films are, and they're like 6-minute shorts.
Is Chad the one where it's not the one where he meets like his high school coach?
Yes, that's the one.
Are you? Hold on. That was like scripted?
Completely scripted. I wrote that as a short film.
Dude,
yeah.
I feel like you're playing with my fucking mind right now.
I know. And
I watch that thing all the time.
Wow.
And I'm like, just bawling my eyes out.
Yeah. Chad was a beloved friend of mine for a while. I was an actor in something I had originally done. I said, Chad, I know you have some of this trauma in your own life that you're trying to work through with your past. Here's this PSA I want to create. Would you mind workshopping, and so I presented the script to the agent.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just still trying to grasp my mind. Because, what was the, you would never know.
Right.
You would, and obviously that was the goal.
Right.
Golly. I would still call it a documentary. Almost.
Yeah.
There's no part of me that would be like, yeah, that's scripted.
Yeah. And I would say in that situation, I see myself as a writer,
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Eliot. I always feel like I leave a little bit lifted up.
Lifted? Oh, good.
For sure. So I appreciate you sitting down with us. And was this fun for you? Hopefully it was fun.
Like I said, brother, you more than the conversation, your presence is a healing presence, and just being able to be with you. I know you're working, but it's a real gift.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
Next time on the Musicbed Podcast, we sit down with director and visual artist Jared Malik Royal.
We're off schedule by like 30 minutes and it's all gonna fall apart. And then you just can look at them after you've been like, I just ran up a mountain carrying a log on my back, being chased by wolves. And it's going to be okay.
We're gonna make it. Yeah.